Hello and welcome, guys. So this is going to be a video series about solid principles. The first one will be classically the single responsibility principle. I'm going to cover all of them, maybe in not the direct order, but let's see. So why I decided to make these videos, actually at my work we are refactoring our project to domain-driven design, and I've talked to our newer developers and I've realized that solid is still quite confusing. So yeah, that's why I decided just to make a video series. Maybe you having struggles yourself as well. Right, so in terms of the videos, I'm gonna go with practical examples. I'm not gonna go into theory. So I'll just show you problems which you might face and how each principle might solve them. All right, let's jump to code. All right, so we have an auth service in front of us. This is just a dummy service I created, and this is our NestJS project. I will push it into Git repository a bit later so you can check it out for yourself. So it has only one method to log in. It has email, password, and just doing the classical stuff like checking the password, right, and generating token for auth. So yeah, I wanted to go through this code and just check what are violations here. There are not only single responsibility principle violated here, there are others as well, but we'll focus only on SRP. And also just I wanted to mention that for me it became much clearer what SRP means when someone told me that you should avoid making a God objects, right? The objects which does everything. So we need to try to make classes, services, whatever, which are responsible, which have only one reason to change. So let's take a look here how many reasons this service has to change. All right, let's start with the constructor. So here we are injecting user entity. This is just dummy entity, and we are using like type-orm, whatever. So this is our database access. This is GWT service, which is a package which we just installed. And this is just, I guess, a default way to create tokens for auth. And then we go to our method. We have user, right? We are fetching it from database, just checking if we have user. If we don't have it, right, invalid credentials, probably not the best way. We'll just write here also failed auth. So we're not going to give user any unneeded information. Then we'll check if we have valid password. We're using bcrypt for that, or bcrypt, whatever. This is kind of default as well for checking the password, right? Once again, if password didn't match, right, we do not authorize user, and this is our failed flow. Otherwise, we are moving to our success flow. I just wrote here that we are saving user into database because probably we'll just have some metadata which we want to update on the user, like last login date, whatever, right? Then we are creating some payload and generating token. Pretty standard. And then we have some kind of logger. I don't know, maybe here we will log into some external service, or maybe we'll do some, I don't know, maybe even analytics here as well. So this is, for now, we are just logging into the console, but this is just something which is quite often happening on the login of the user. And then we are just returning the user. All right, so our service is finished. We are happy. Everything is nice and dandy. And then on the next day, let's say our manager comes in and says, we know we are not allowed to use type-orm. So we need to switch from type-orm to Prisma. Or he says we cannot use SQL, we need to use Mongo. All right, so what do we do? So here we're depending on type-orm already, right? We are importing from it and we have SQL, and then you're like, oh my God, I just finished working and now I need to rewrite this query and save query, and you're like, all right, this is not a big problem, but actually it is. What if you have similar queries all over your project in not a single service, but in 20 services? So if you have way more methods here, right? So this is already a problem. On the second day, let's say your team lead comes in and said, I need unit tests, right? Team lead. So how can we test this service, right? So we have a repository here. It has quite a lot of methods, right? So we can't mock them. The same goes for GWT service. We're going to mock every single one of them. So we can't do this. So we are unable to write tests. And on the third day, let's assume they say that you're going to work in parallel, right? So the two team members or more will start working on it. And let's say your team member changes schema without you knowing, of user, right? He, I don't know, deletes password. The password is no longer, or let's say something similar. He changes first name to name. So once again, schema changed, your code breaks, or you need to resolve conflicts. So essentially, you cannot work in parallel. All right, so these are main problems which we have here. And let's see how single responsibility can fix them. Just a brief pause. If you enjoy this type of content or want to watch me live code projects like this, hit subscribe button and ring that bell. It is free, takes 2 seconds, and helps me a ton. As you can see, only a very small percentage of you guys actually subscribe to my channel. Anyways, thank you very much for all the support. Let's continue. All right, let's take a look at how it should be, right? We have our auth service. It became quite smaller, but at the same time, we have more dependencies in our constructor, right? It might be a bit strange, but now let's take a look at how it fixes all our problems. So now we are importing using user repository, and in user repository, we are just triggering find by email and then update last login, right? Let's take a look at what's happening in it. So we are just providing email and we are expecting user to be returned back. And here we are providing user ID once again, and we are not expecting anything, right? So why is it better? Although we are importing here type-ORM and we're using SQL, right? We can change to something else now. We can use Mongo here. We just replace this function, right? And everyone who uses this user repository, they are automatically fine. They don't care what's happening inside of user repository. It can change, right? The only thing auth service cares about, for example, in this line, is that you will return him user. And no matter what happening is inside, is it SQL, I don't know, you store it in memory, using Mongo, everything works for auth service, right? So we eliminated dependency on SQL and type-ORM. Now let's look at the password service. So here we're just providing plain password and hash password. All right, we might be this is not ideal. We can just provide like current and other, like to compare them. But for simplicity's sake, I just wrote plain and hashed, and we're comparing them using bycrypt. But we can change to something else here now, right? We can use different package. Once again, auth service don't care. It just cares that you return a boolean, true or false. Is it the same or not? And the same thing pretty much goes everywhere here, right? So logger service, we don't care. We just provide email and it logs. We don't care where it logs. And token service, once again, we don't care. We just, we're expecting some kind of token, which is string. We don't care who generates this string. So the point I'm trying to make is that this auth service now has only one reason to change. The reason is if we change the rules how we log in user, which are business rules. So this service now depends only on business rules. All of this, we don't care what's happening inside of them. They just return what we expect, and that's it. Our code doesn't break. All right, let's think if we fixed all other problems, right? Can we work in parallel? Yes, we can. Once again, as I said, someone can work on password service, change package here, right? We just care that he returns the boolean. So now we can work in parallel with someone who is working on a different service. Can we test this code? Yes, we can. Now let's take a look at our code. So I have a describe function. I am able to mock every single request to our repository. I'm able to mock password service because I just care about the things they return, right? So I'm mocking all of them, and then I can run tests the way I like. So now I think we fixed all the violations, and our code looks pretty good. So now we have only single reason for our code to change. And this is essentially what single responsibility is talking about, right? So login has only one reason to change if our business rules change. Our user repository is now responsible only for updating user and handling database operations on top of, right, our user. Password service only handles comparing passwords, hashing, everything related to password. So you get the point. All right, let's do a summary of what we've learned. So we went from service like this, where we had direct import of SQL database, type-ORM, and different packages. So essentially, we had multiple reasons to change. We were dependent on specific implementations. And now we went to service. Well, we are violating some other rules here, but let's say we are no longer tightly coupled. right? We have only one reason to change, which is business logic, which are login rules. We can make independent changes. Code doesn't break on changes. The code is testable now. Teams can work in parallel, as we discussed before. And although we have more lines of code now overall, but the code is more readable and maintainable. And the solid rules is universally known, so if a new team member comes in, it will be understandable right away what is happening. All right, so this is pretty much it for single responsibility principle. If something wasn't clear, let me know in the comments. I hope it was helpful. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.